Seasons of Maple Ridge. Part 2. The next morning dawned cool and bright, with a soft fog lingering over the fields surrounding Maple Ridge. Betty had grown used to waking early in the quiet of the house, the kind of silence that let you hear your own thoughts clearly, something she hadn't experienced in years back in the city. She decided to head outside and tackle some of the yard work. The grass had grown wild during the long months James hadn't been able to tend to it, and the garden beds were overrun with weeds and last year's dead blooms. With a pair of gardening gloves she found in the shed and a rusty rake, Betty set to work, kneeling on the soft earth as memories surfaced with every movement. From the corner of her eye, she noticed movement behind the fence and looked up to see Ava, the teenage girl she had met earlier, walking along the neighbor's side, carrying a battered skateboard under one arm. "Morning," Ava called over the fence, flashing a quick grin. "Need a hand with that?" Betty smiled. "I think I'm past the handout stage, but I appreciate the offer." Ava hopped over the fence with an agility that reminded Betty of her own youth. "You sure? I'm pretty good at killing weeds. And I'm fast." Betty chuckled. "Well then, welcome to the garden, Ava." As they worked side by side, the girl talked about school, her plans for the future, and the frustrations of living in a town where everyone already knows your business. Betty listened carefully, remembering her own teenage years, how small Maple Ridge had felt back then, too. "So, what made you come back here?" Ava asked, breaking a weed free with a practiced yank. Betty paused, wiping the sweat from her brow. "My brother passed away, and I inherited this old place. I thought I'd come to figure out what to do with it." Ava nodded slowly. "Yeah, my mom says that house has a lot of stories. Secrets, even." Betty smiled wryly. "You could say that." They worked through the morning, sharing stories and laughter. At one point, Betty pulled out a water bottle from her bag and handed it to Ava. "You know," Betty said thoughtfully, "I never thought I'd be back here, making friends with a teenage girl in my own backyard." Ava grinned. "Hey, you're cool. Most grown-ups don't even say hi." There was a comfortable silence as they rested beneath the old oak tree, watching a pair of cardinals dart between the branches. Betty felt a warmth she hadn't expected, a connection bridging generations, reminding her that life still had surprises. Before Ava left, she looked at Betty with genuine curiosity. "If you ever want to talk about those stories your brother left behind, I'm around. I like mysteries." Betty laughed softly. "I think you'll get your fill." As Ava climbed back over the fence and disappeared down the street, Betty looked up at the sky, feeling a quiet hope take root inside her. Maybe coming home wasn't just about the past. Maybe it was about new beginnings, too. The next morning, Betty decided to visit the Maple Ridge Diner, the kind of place where the coffee was strong, the booths were worn from decades of use, and everybody knew your name, or at least your face. As she pushed open the door, The familiar jingle of the bell brought a wave of nostalgia. The scent of frying bacon and fresh coffee filled the air. The place was busier than she expected for a Tuesday morning, a handful of locals chatting quietly over newspapers and mugs. She spotted Ray Halstead sitting alone at a corner table, a steaming cup of black coffee in front of him and a folded newspaper beside it. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, and his eyes sparkled behind his glasses. "Morning, Betty," he greeted, waving her over. She smiled and slid into the booth across from him. "Morning, Ray. Smells like you've been here a while." "Just got here myself," he said with a grin. "Thought I'd see if you wanted to join me." A waitress with a bright smile and a name tag that read Maggie soon took Betty's order, coffee with cream and a slice of apple pie, her favorite from childhood. As they waited, Ray leaned forward. "I heard you've been going through James's things. Found anything interesting?" Betty hesitated, then pulled the small tin box from her bag, opening it to reveal the stack of letters she'd discovered. Ray's eyes softened as he looked over the letters. "James was a good man," he said quietly. "Kept a lot to himself, though." Betty nodded. "I'm starting to see that. There's a story here I never knew." They sipped their coffee, the diner bustling around them but the booth feeling like a quiet island. "So," Ray said, "what brings you back for good? I mean, besides James's passing." Betty looked out the window, watching the leaves drift lazily down the street. "I guess I was running from something. Or maybe running to something. The city never felt like home. Maple Ridge did. It always did." Ray smiled knowingly. "You know, this town has a way of pulling people back, even when they think they're done with it." They talked about the old days, the high school dances, the summer festivals, the pranks they'd pulled as teenagers. Ray told a story about the time James had almost gotten caught sneaking into the swimming hole after hours, and Betty laughed harder than she had in years. By the time the apple pie arrived, the mood had shifted from nostalgia to hope. Ray reached across the table and tapped one of the letters gently. "Maybe it's time to finish James's story. And maybe write a little of your own." Betty smiled, a spark kindling in her chest. "Maybe it is." As they finished their coffee, Betty felt something she hadn't in a long time, like maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she needed to be. One rainy evening, as the wind rattled the old windows and thunder rolled softly over Maple Ridge, Betty found herself seated at the kitchen table, a single lamp casting a warm glow over the scattered letters and photographs. Among the many pieces of paper was a folded envelope marked in James's familiar handwriting. "For Betty, read when you're ready." Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. The letter inside was dated October 12, 1965, a night Betty remembered well but had never fully understood. "Dear Betty, if you're reading this, it means I never got the chance to tell you everything I wanted. That night, The night we argued by the old oak tree. I was scared. Scared of what the future held, scared of losing you, and scared of the dreams I thought we shared slipping through my fingers. I wish I could take it back. I wish I had been brave enough to say the things that mattered. You were always the light in my life, even when I was too stubborn to see it. I hope that wherever life has taken you, you know how much you meant to me. Forever, James. Betty's breath caught as memories flooded in, the crisp autumn air, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the bitter words exchanged in frustration and fear. She recalled turning away from James that night, tears blurring her vision, feeling like she was losing more than just a friend, losing a part of herself. She pressed her palm to the letter, whispering into the quiet kitchen, "I never knew, James." Outside, the rain softened to a gentle drizzle. The house seemed to hold its breath. For the first time in 50 years, Betty allowed herself to grieve not just for her brother, but for the boy they both once were, full of hope, fear, and unspoken love. That night marked a turning point, a bridge between past regrets and the possibilities that lay ahead. With the letter folded carefully back into its envelope, Betty felt a fragile hope take root. Maybe healing was possible. Maybe stories left unfinished could still find their endings. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. The Maple Ridge Public Library stood at the heart of town, a small brick building with ivy creeping up its walls and a faded wooden sign that creaked in the wind. Betty had passed it on her way to the diner, but today she decided to stop in. Pushing open the heavy oak door, she was greeted by the scent of old paper and polished wood, a smell that stirred memories of quiet afternoons spent lost in books. Inside, a handful of townsfolk browsed the shelves or sat at worn tables, reading or chatting softly. Behind the front desk sat Miss Eleanor Parker, the elderly librarian Betty remembered from childhood, her silver hair pulled back neatly and glasses perched on the tip of her nose. "Betty Collins," Eleanor said warmly, standing up to embrace her. "It's been ages. Welcome home." Betty smiled. "Thank you, Eleanor. I heard the library might be closing." Eleanor sighed, motioning toward a faded notice pinned to the bulletin board, "Maple Ridge Public Library, closing soon without support." "The town's budget has been tight for years," Eleanor explained. "Fewer people come in, and donations have dwindled. If we can't raise enough funds soon, we'll have to shut the doors." Betty's heart tightened. The library had been her refuge as a child, the place where she dreamed of far-off places and new adventures. "We can't let that happen," she said firmly. Eleanor's eyes sparkled with hope. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." Over the next hour, Betty helped Eleanor organize a list of local supporters and brainstorm ideas to save the library. A community fundraiser, book drives, local author readings, anything to bring people back through the doors. As Betty left the library, the autumn sun was dipping low, casting long shadows over the quiet streets. She looked up at the flickering light above the library entrance and felt a surge of determination. This town had given her roots. Now it was time to give something back. And maybe, just maybe, in helping save the library, she could help save a piece of herself, too. The following afternoon, Betty found herself in the local community center, surrounded by long folding tables and a small group of familiar faces. It was the weekly quilting circle, a tradition that had brought together the women of Maple Ridge for generations. The room buzzed with friendly chatter as colorful scraps of fabric were laid out, needles clicked, and stories flowed like the soft hum of a well-loved song. Betty felt a gentle tug of nostalgia as she settled into a chair beside Mrs. Jensen, the town's unofficial historian and master quilter. "Betty, dear," Mrs. Jensen said, handing her a square of fabric patterned with tiny blue flowers, "we've started a new project. A quilt to celebrate the history of Maple Ridge. Each patch tells a story." Betty ran her fingers over the fabric, thinking of the house, the oak tree, and the people she had reconnected with. "I'd love to help," she said softly. As the group worked, Betty shared memories from her childhood, harvest festivals, the 4th of July parades, and her late brother James, who had always been a quiet but steady presence. Mrs. Jensen nodded knowingly. "These quilts are like living memories, stitched together with love and time. They hold the stories of our lives, just like the letters you've been reading." Hours passed in peaceful rhythm, and when Betty left the community center, she carried a small square of the quilt, a token of belonging and history. Walking back to the house, she glanced up at the sky, now painted with streaks of pink and orange. The world was changing, but here in Maple Ridge, some things remained constant. Like quilts, like letters, like the unbreakable ties of home. And Betty felt more connected than ever, to the past, the present, and whatever the future might hold. That evening, as twilight settled over Maple Ridge, the weather began to shift. The sky darkened with rolling clouds, and a distant rumble of thunder echoed through the valley. Betty sat by the living room window, a soft blanket over her knees, watching the old oak tree sway in the growing wind. The house creaked and groaned, reminding her that it, like her, had weathered many storms. The local weather alert buzzed softly on her phone, a warning for an approaching storm expected to bring heavy rain and strong winds through the night. She thought about the fragile state of the house and the memories it held. The house had been a shelter through calm days and tempests alike. As the first drops of rain tapped against the windowpane, Betty felt a familiar mixture of apprehension and resolve. The storm would test her in more ways than one. By late evening, the wind howled fiercely, rattling the shutters and sending leaves swirling like confetti in a dark parade. Lightning flashed, illuminating the backyard in brief, electric bursts. Betty lit a few candles and sat quietly, the flickering flames dancing shadows across the walls. She pulled out the letters once again, reading by candlelight, finding comfort in the voices of the past amid the storm's fury outside. When the power flickered and went out, she felt no fear, only the steady beat of her heart and the enduring strength of the home around her. Morning would come, bringing calm and new beginnings. And for now, the storm was just another chapter in the story of Maple Ridge. Thanks for listening, friends. This has been James, just sharing a piece of my heart with you. If this story reminded you of someone or something dear, go ahead and like, subscribe, and maybe share it with a friend who needs a moment of peace. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and take care of your memories.